Who dat, Saints fans? Welcome back to the podcast as we are on episode 666. Hope that doesn't mean anything bad. We're going to get in and talk a little bit about today's events going on. We've got mini camps for the New Orleans Saints. We've got Ted Ginn back in the news. That would be 6 weeks plus 2 for those curious about his IR return. And that's a joke, by the way. And we've got Saints interviewing, bringing in, looking at a couple of receivers. I am focusing on one name. Maybe that's rude. There are others to also consider as we go through here. So a lot to talk about today. I think that's a good thing. Like, the Saints are continually trying to work on themselves, and obviously every team does this, so it's not necessarily special, but it does show that they are still trying to build and work on the wide receiver room. I think the two names that they're bringing in are very curious, isn't the right word. You have a player in the fourth round, Keke Coutee, who a little bit undersized, but still could be a slot guy, and hasn't really performed that great last year with Indianapolis, or last 2 years. Hasn't really played much. That's an issue potentially, but still something to, kind of keep an eye out for. Spend a lot of time with the practice squad here. And then you got Ginn Jr., who played with the Dolphins and New England over the past 2 years, like very limited way, but still bringing more receivers, taking a look at what this team can do as a whole. And then, of course, you've got some, in my opinion, really good players at the position already. And we'll actually kind of show you all a few of those pieces here in the background as we are going through and looking and watching through what places like NewOrleansFootball.com and NewOrleansSaints.com are putting out, because there is a limited amount of visuals that they can be provided, but we can see Chris Olave in his fun padded hats as well. So welcome in, Who Dats. Hope you're having a fantastic Tuesday. Who Dat, God bless. Let's go ahead and welcome in those who are here already. Lester, Cam, DJ Twigga, Bim, Lawrence, Dillon, B. Will, Matthew Penn, Nikki the Fish, AJ, Mr. Don, Still Bill, Pull My Finger, Najee, Night Lord, Emmett, Mr. Don, again, Jonathan. Welcome in. Let's go ahead and get it in. So big news today is mostly going to be wide receiver based. That doesn't mean it's the only news, but I do think it's a lot of what, one, we've been talking about, and two, I think it's really important to talk about what I think has been one of the best things that this team has started to really build on this year, and that is their wide receiver room. So, we got Chris Olave. Been some really nice, at least nice to see for me, videos of Michael Thomas working out. That's always freaking fantastic, right? We want to see more Michael Thomas workout videos. I've been squatting, 415, 410, working, getting healthy. Also at camps lately. He's been in OTAs, going to be at mini camps here, actually working with the team. Not 100%. They've already talked about that, but I think you're seeing him on the road to actually being consistent in camp, preseason, and then actually launching for the season. So that's exciting. Obviously, Rashid Shaheed is, if you don't know, you should know, in my opinion, going to be one of the better receivers in Saints in terms of slot, recent memory type deal. So I'm excited about that. All of these things are going to be discussed today and more. So wide receiver, big one. Ted Ginn Jr. is back. Ted Ginn is actually helping with the coaching staff, which I think is freaking dope. I think that's important. Ted Ginn is, in my opinion, one of the most underrated Saints flankers of all time. Now, I say that because most people don't necessarily think flankers when they think wide receivers. Almost everybody jumps to the big name wide receivers, the Michael Thomases, the Eric Martins, stuff like that, the Joe Horns, the traditional split ends who actually line up on the outside are your true number ones. But, flankers can also be number one type receivers. If they're not number ones, they can still be very effective. An example of this is actually, why does my brain want to blank? Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks is not a traditional number one, but he's been a 1,000-yard receiver for multiple teams. He is a flanker. He is not a on the line of scrimmage traditional number one, but he still had a huge impact. I think Ted Ginn is that type of a player when he was with New Orleans. And I think that we've seen both as a return guy and as a receiver. I mean, the guy was in the league for over a decade. A lot that he can bring, and even though he was never a 1,000-yard receiver, he was still a very effective flanker with Carolina, with New Orleans, obviously. And then he played with Miami, San Francisco, Chicago, Arizona, Carolina, New Orleans. So several teams. So bringing him in to work is, I think, really good. I think he was also one of those guys that I would say one of the better yards after catch guys, and that you could see that contributing to his special team success. And If there's a guy that can come in and maybe help teach some of those things, love the name. Yeah, he's a former Saint. Sure, that's always fun to talk about, but I actually think that he can actually help this team. I think that he can help as a coach and help some of the newer guys. Your wide receiver room right now is Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, A.T. Perry, Brian Edwards, Traquan Smith, Kawan Baker, Keith Kirkwood, Kirk Merritt, Malik Flowers, James Washington, Shaquan Davis, and they're bringing in Keke Coutee and Lynn Bowden Jr. for workouts. So that is 12 names plus 2 and whoever else they decide to look in and work in. Obviously, there's still conversations about Hunter Renfrow, where Derek Carr and some of the receivers went out doing a little gator hunting and everything, a little swamp fishing. Fantastic. Team building exercise. Love it. Man's talking to Hunter Renfrow on Instagram afterwards. And obviously there's still plenty of Saints fans who want DeAndre Hopkins to make an appearance. So I like seeing the team go through all their options to try to put the best groups they can. And these are young guys too. Like QT is 26 this year. I mean, he's still a young guy. A Bowden is 25. He's younger. So they're not even looking at necessarily old veterans. They are looking in guys who can maybe contribute right now. Sam says, why the hats and no contact drills? Referring to Chris Olave and everybody else running those hats. Just a safety precaution. These are actually things that have gotten brought up by the CBA. And when you have the NFLPA want to talk about safety a lot, these are things that you're going to see with these big poofy hats. And it might seem ridiculous, but it's all about player safety and trying to have them be the best they can be. That's really all it comes down to, is just trying to keep them safe for any type of contact. As a wide receiver, that can come from, you fall while trying to make an amazing catch. Today, you actually had Derek Carr connect to Michael Thomas in a beautiful one-handed catch. What if he fell? What if he bumped his head on the grass? Is that likely to cause an injury? No, that's the whole point of having a helmet. It's just more of taking the precautions that you can take to make things be as safe as possible in a even non-contact setting. That's really all it comes down to. There's a really big focus right now on, concussions and everything. I'm not trying to downplay those and how they affect players and teams, but I am going to say that if you can take any precaution that you can, go for it. Go for it. NTR says, sucks about Shaheed's groin injury. Hopefully he'll recover in time for full camp. I'm not worried about any of this stuff right now. I do recognize that can be an issue. So sure, if you do have a guy coming in, fine. It's also kind of like you got Blake Group has come in and been competitive in the kicking position. All these things are happening right now. Does it matter? Yeah, it matters, but is it a big deal? No, I wouldn't say so. I mean, even Nick Underhill reported about the Rashid Shaheed thing, that it's not serious. They're just going to hold him out for the week, make sure he's good to go. He'll be fine by camp. So we're still in the middle of June. All these things can look bad, but I think you're doing the right thing. If you got a groin injury, then yeah, make sure you spend that 1 to 2 weeks rest. Make sure you're completely good to go, but they're not worried about anything, so I'm not going to worry about anything yet. Now, because we're talking wide receivers real quick, I do want to mention your best Saints running back, who is also an elite wide receiver in his own right, Alvin Kamara. One quote by Derek Carr today after practice, and I love this quote, was he got asked about Alvin Kamara's ability as a route runner. Derek Carr's direct quote was, bruh, that's not normal. And I think that it gets forgotten that even though there are good receiving running backs out there, from an actual route running perspective, Alvin Kamara is truly on a unique level. That doesn't mean that there aren't other receivers at running back out there. And that also doesn't mean that there are not other running backs who can catch the ball and have yards after catch. But in terms of actually running pivot routes, wheel routes, flat pattern attacks, all these different things that he can do, it's pretty rare. And if you're New Orleans, you're lucky to have that type of guy here. I would love for a certain other New Orleans Saints running back to also start showing that same level of excitement in Miller. Yeah, I'm talking about Miller. Would love for him to be the next guy that kind of has that same oomph in his play, pep in his step here. Just throw out some cliches. We'll see if he ends up being the next one. But, yeah, I mean, it's good to see it. And I'll say this. Ross Jackson and I were talking a little bit earlier, and he posted this, that as an athlete, Alvin Kamara looks fantastic right now in camp. I thought he got a lot of miles on him last year, and there's definitely concern of at what point do you start worrying about him diminishing as a player? Is he still in his elite stage? And I think right now he is. And I love what I'm seeing from him in camp. He just moves very fluid. He looks just really good in terms of how he's coming in out of breaks and what he's doing in terms of the bag work. His footwork is just immaculate as we're used to seeing it. So right now, I mean, he just looks like Alvin Kamara, and that's a really good sign. Now, again, June, not trying to overhype some stuff, but man, that's exciting to see him have that level of explosion. If you can manage to continue to have him on a good snap count, you're not having to rely on him to be a 25-30 carry a guy or even a 25-30 touch guy, and you can rely on Jamal Williams, you can rely on Kendra Miller, then you're talking about AK really being that dynamic elite threat that he has been for a long time. And I'm not trying to dump on AK. I'm not. I think that AK can truly be a 3-down guy if he wanted to be, if they needed him to be. But last year, he has had more attempts than he'd ever had in his career. Last year, 223, and the year before that, 240. This is a guy that had, for the first 4 years of his career, never gone above 194 rushing attempts. He was basically averaging about 175 a season before coming into 2021. They just kind of had to start relying on him. But in those seasons, here's why it's a big deal, is he made up for it because he made 80 receptions in his first 4 years. He went 81, 81, 81, and then 83. Last year, 57. I'm sorry, last year, 57, and the year before that, 47. So he's kind of been out of the receiving game and more as a pure running back. And I think that that is a multi-pronged problem. I don't think it's just the disappearance of Drew Brees and the addition of Jameis Winston and Alvin Kamara that led to, or Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton that led to Alvin Kamara receiving less passes. I think it was also they had to use him more as a weapon on the ground because they simply did not have anybody else being as effective. Mark Ingram was not as effective as he once was. You didn't have Murray, for a good part of last year, and then Murray ends up going away. I think if you're New Orleans, you have to get back to what made Alvin Kamara so amazing, so elite, what made him the Offensive Rookie of the Year, what made him a 2-time All-Pro, second team, and that is getting him a balance of air game and ground game. And also one thing to note, it's no coincidence that when his reception numbers went down, so did his yards per carry. Because when you don't fear Alvin Kamara as much as a receiver, then you can concentrate more on stacking the box. And this isn't meant to be a negative Alvin Kamara sucks comment, but truly, Alvin Kamara has never done well against a stacked box. Mark Ingram was actually one of the best running backs in the league versus an 8-man box or more over, 2017 to 2020 type years. Alvin Kamara's never been that guy. Alvin Kamara feasts in space. It doesn't mean Alvin Kamara is bad. Alvin Kamara is very good, but he definitely is the type of guy that you can slow down by stacking the box. And if you can remove that from the situation, you can get him back into having more of a spread field. You're talking about being a better player. And that's why I love seeing this Derek Carr to Alvin Kamara connection so much. If that can get built in, where not only is the play calling trying to open it up for Alvin Kamara, but now you have a quarterback really trying to make an effort to open it up for Alvin Kamara, that helps out the team as a whole and really gets Kamara back into that elite stage, back into space, instead of him having a bunch of inside zone runs against 7 and 8 guys and 3 linebackers and him only getting 4 yards. I think that's kind of what helps him the most. It also hopefully helps limit his potential for injury, which is something that you have to think about for a guy that, believe it or not, coming into this year is going to be 28 years old. I know it's crazy, but this is his 7th season in New Orleans. Running backs don't typically last that long. And I'm not saying that his reign is over. I think Alvin Kamara still has years left if used in a way that gives him longevity and also uses him to maximum effect. And I'm excited about what it looks like you're seeing early in camp in terms of the install that they're going through and the plays that you see them being run. You're seeing Alvin Kamara be that guy that is really focusing in the receiver room. And just on the opposite side of that, to give an example, Pete Warner is spending a lot of time right now in minicamp and everything with the nickels and the cornerback room covering that just like he did last year. just like he did last year. If you remember, last year he was covering Michael Thomas in camp out of the slot. So it looks like, both from the Dennis Allen perspective and now the Pete Carmichael and the Derek Carr perspective, that they're trying to make sure that the guys are in the proper spots. And when I say proper spots, I'm talking about where they thrive the most. I want to show, I'm just going to put up on the screen so y'all can enjoy a little bit of Alvin Kamara running some of these routes. In this case, you're seeing on the screen a basic Texas type concept here, which is one of the things that I felt like he did really well. Coming out of the backfield, attacking to the inside, across that linebacker's face. Again, this isn't necessarily anything special, but I want to see these connections built. I want to see more of that from Derek Carr and Alvin Kamara. I want to see him used in this way. I've often said that in terms of Kamara's ability, one of the things that they've never utilized him enough is how dominant he can be from that Texas concept, not only from a pivot route, that's a different thing, not only from, flat concepts where they're running Hank with him, putting him in those situations, or even wheeling him out and going with him deep. Really having him attack the middle in the passing game, not something they've done a lot of. TJ says, I think AK can be elite for 8 to 9 weeks. He needs people to split the touches. I agree. And I think the more that you split, the better it is for him. If you go back to last year, let's use last year as a good barometer, because last year was rough in a lot of ways offensively. And I don't sit there and blame Alvin Kamara for all that. But I do think that there are games that Alvin Kamara just did not have as much success. And let me give you some examples of why from his own box scores. Now, we don't like box score scouting here, but it's still worth noting. So, for example, let's take a look at the Seattle game. We would say the Seattle game was a good game for him. He had 91 yards receiving and 103 yards carrying, but he had 29 total touches. Why is that important? His yards per carry was 3.4. Abysmal. And he had no touchdowns in that game. Why is that important? Because if you go to the games that he really did dominate last year and where you did see him scoring more is actually the games he had less touches as a running back and more as a receiver. An example, look at the Las Vegas Raiders game. Only 18 carries there. That's 5 less. It's not a ton less, but it is less. Had a rushing touchdown, also had 2 receiving touchdowns. Beyond that, go away from just that. Look at the games where you have used him historically. Go back to 2020, for example, and you look at his usage. Where do you see him actually having his biggest effect in his biggest days? I'll look at games like, go back to the year that he had the awesome Minnesota game. He had 6 rushing touchdowns. But don't forget, he only carried the ball 22 times. In that same year, go back to the Las Vegas Raiders game. 2 rushing touchdowns on only 13 carries, but he still had 9 receptions for 95 yards. The next game, Green Bay, only 6 carries, 58 yards, but 13 receptions for 139 and 2 TDs. Alvin Kamara is at his best when he is splitting his time and spreading the field. That's when he's the best offensive weapon. Doesn't mean that he can't run 25 times and be a good running back, but when he actually has time and space and he's not being run to the point of exhaustion and being gassed, because I think most people who watched Alvin Kamara last year could say that you witnessed him being gassed. We've also seen that the more he's in these contact situations, inside zone, outside zone running, and 25, 30 times, he started to see some of those little injuries peaking up. But if you go to when he doesn't have to deal with that as much, less likely to be injured. When he's in space and he can use that contact balance he's become famous for, when he can use that elusivity, that word I invented just for him, out in space, then he doesn't have to deal with those soft tissue injuries and major injuries as much. Now, you're not going to be able to prevent all injuries, right? That's just not possible. But what you can do is put him in situations that utilize him to his most effective manner. And I think the history has shown his most effective manner is space. And when you're running him, that means you want to run him against 6 and 5-man boxes, not 8, not 9. And it's when you're putting him in space, you want him in the slot so that he's one-on-one with a linebacker that's a mismatch now. You want to use him in multiple ways. It's even back to some of the older looks when the Saints would line up Latavius Murray and Alvin Kamara at the same time, or Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara on the field at the same time, and you force defenses to respect both of them. That's my hope from Jamal Williams. And to a small degree, it's my hope for Kendre Miller. I do kind of see Kendre Miller more as a long-term replacement for Alvin Kamara than a long-term replacement for a Mark Ingram type, but maybe they end up using him as that while you have Kamara still being the high-level player that he is. But when you look at Kamara's most successful games throughout his career, and you're just going from a pure touchdown perspective, and you can use a website. I personally use Pro Football Reference. I think that's a good one to use. But go on to places like Pro Football Reference and go to his game logs. Here's what I want you to do. Sort his game logs by the games he scored the most touchdowns, and then do a comparison of how much he ran those games and how much he didn't run, how much he caught. And the game that he had the most TDs is obviously the game against Minnesota, which was a fantastic record-tying game. But beyond that, look at the game against Tampa in 2018. Only ran 8 times, but 3 TDs in the game. You go to look at San Francisco in 2020, 3 TDs in the game, only 8 carries. You go look at Raiders that we talked about 2022, 4 TDs, but 18 carries. Go look at Tampa 2017, 10 carries, 3 TDs. You see the point I'm making here. It's not that Alvin Kamara is a bad running back, just that when he is elite, when he is that all-pro, he's being used as a receiver as well, which is why the receiver core has to improve. You can use them to distract, and you can use them to make sure there's not attention being focused directly on AK, because there have been times where AK has been completely shut out. Going back to, what was it, 2018 against against Dallas, or 2019, where they basically completely washed him out, right? You can do that if nobody else is pulling up the slack. So that's why I kind of get excited seeing the team work so well with the wide receiver room, and then seeing them utilize AK in a lot of these more AK traditional sets. And I like seeing that in minicamp, because right now you're installing the offense right now. This is what you're doing. You are preparing this team for what they're going to spend their time doing. So when we're focusing on stars like Marshawn Lattimore and Alvin Kamara in the drills, looking him at the bags, checking his footwork, utilizing him in when we're installing the offense, like, hey, we're going to use this Texas concept, make sure it's down pat, make sure the timing is there. That is really, really important for me. And I'm putting up some of those videos here in the background because I know y'all enjoy seeing them. I certainly enjoy watching them. And shout out to the New Orleans Saints website for throwing those in. Really appreciate them. And also shout out to NOLA.football doing it as well. So if y'all are wondering where to get some of that tape, well, New Orleans.football, and of course the New Orleans Saints page as well. And also, really want to shout out real quick. We're not going to turn it into a big topic, but Taysom Hill taking quarterback snaps. Oh boy. Here we go. Here we go. Oh no. Taysom Hill taking QB snaps. The world's ending. You thought you were away from it, but you're not. Oh my goodness. T5 says run that platoon system like San Francisco and Miami. And I do think that's one thing that New Orleans wants to get to. 100% agree with that. BM says multi-pass AK in the Fifth Element. I agree. Great reference, by the way. Great reference. NTR says legal trouble aside, AK is still arguably the best offensive weapon the Saints have. When he eats, it helps everyone. And I 100% agree with that. TJ says the fumbles are definitely an Alvin Kamara problem, though. I would counter with yes, but that was a problem for one season. Last year, there was definitely an Alvin Kamara fumbling issue. I would say that it's not something that's been a problem for him historically. You go back to his career leading up to that. So the 5 seasons prior, he had 7 total fumbles in 5 seasons, which is 912 rushing attempts and 373 receiving attempts. That is right at 1,300 total attempts and 7 fumbles. And then last year, he had 4 fumbles last year and only 223 rushing attempts with 57 receiving. So less than 300 attempts and 4 fumbles. That was a problem last year. Hopefully not as much of a problem this year. Nikki says, my young adult children that still live with me pay 75 to 80% of the groceries, passing the savings on to you. Nikki, I really do appreciate that. I actually had to buy groceries today for my family of 5, spent right at $500. And it's a little wild. It's rough. And I appreciate you donating to the channel. If y'all want to help the channel, you got a couple ways you can do it. You can check out our donate links. We have PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, or you can check out our merch store. reason I like to promote the merch store is simple. I think the merch store is great because it allows you to actually get something for it and support the channel. I still believe, and I really can't wait to see if somebody picks it up, this all-white Who Dat Confessional cap is going to be the cleanest cap to wear to Saints games this year, and it's $35 plus tax. So you're helping me and also rocking some absolutely beautiful swag. Or you can get the throwbacks that I designed, which is that traditional black and gold with the Who Dat Confessional logo on it. So if you want to support the channel, it's not required, but it is greatly appreciated because people like myself can't do what I do without the support of y'all. So I really do appreciate it. Mr. Don says, I think the fumbles were a symptom of a guy pressing, trying too hard to do too much. And I think a bad team can cause a guy to press. And just on that point, real quick, kind of go franchise encyclopedia right now. The past 2 years are the worst Alvin Kamara's ever experienced. Because when he got here in 2017, he was the second-ranked offense. In fact, over the first 4 years of his career, this team never ranked worse than 5th in points scored. You had Sean Payton here. You had Drew Brees. You made the playoffs 4 straight times, and you should have gone to the Super Bowl in 2018, but that is what it is. He has had the 19th ranked offense in points scored and the 22nd ranked offense in points scored over the past 2 years. Very different teams. Very different teams. So maybe he is pressing a little bit and then having 2 different quarterbacks. You know, Winston was your leading quarterback in terms of statistics in 2021. Andy Dalton was your leader last year, and he's not even on the team. And Winston's definitely not even in the running for starter. Like, it's completely no shot. For good or bad, whoever wants to support Winston, y'all can. I'm not coming at y'all directly. I'm just being factual, right? So there's been a lot of turnover and turmoil there, and you want to get back to that some way. I'm not saying that Derek Carr is going to be a 5,000-yard all-pro level quarterback, but what I am saying, and what I do truly believe, he gets you closer to that than you've been. And I do really believe that. I believe that he takes you closer to that than you've been. That doesn't mean I don't like Jameis Winston. But Jameis Winston was not a plug-and-play fit. He has a lot of West Coast concepts that certainly fit the New Orleans Saints. But he wasn't a perfect fit. It's just a fact. I'm not trying to be... I'm really not trying to start any drama. I'm not trying to start any arguments, right? I supported Winston being here. I think that's been very clear. Anybody who's followed the content knows I have been a firm supporter of Jameis Winston, and I wanted him to get a legitimate opportunity. Okay? But now that's over. All right? There is no more of that. It's over. Move on. And we can talk about what coulda, woulda, shoulda at another time. But right now, Derek Carr does get you the closest back to that you could possibly have. And Andy Dalton, if it was a decade ago, maybe doesn't, but not at this point in his career. And now he's over at Carolina. So we'll see. Gundam says Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Michael Thomas, best wide receiver core in the NFL. And while I love the positivity, I don't agree with you because you have to prove it. And you don't have anything that justifies what you just said. Here, let me give you a quantitative backing to what I just said. Here's why I'm saying that. Chris Olave, whom I love, 1,000-yard receiver, 4 TDs. Okay, but let's add that up. Michael Thomas, 171-yard, 3 TDs. So now you have 1,200 yards and 7 TDs between those receivers. And then let's add Rashid Shaheed, 488 yards, 2 TDs. So now you have 9 touchdowns and right at 1,700 yards. You know what that sounds a lot like? Michael Thomas by himself in his peak did that same stat line that 3 receivers did last year. Now, I am not trying to dismiss that the potential for greatness is there, but I think as Saints fans, hopefully we've learned to not get too crazy about excitement, right? And I'm not exaggerating, by the way. Go look. If you have forgotten, Michael Thomas, literally, I'm going to read the stat lines. You can see it for yourself. I'm not blowing smoke up your butt. Michael Thomas, 2019, first team All-Pro, Offensive Player of the Year, Pro Bowler, 1,725 yards and 9 TDs at an 80% catch rate. That's a lot. And what did we just rattle off? Here, I'll even math it for you. I'll bust out my handy-dandy calculator in the middle of the stream. you're going to have Olave at 1042, Rashid Shaheed at 488, and Michael Thomas at 171 is 1,701 yards. Same number of touchdowns, less yards. Michael Thomas did that by himself. Now, if you had that Michael Thomas and this Rashid Shaheed and this Chris Olave, you might have a legitimate argument. But they've got to prove it because Michael Thomas hasn't done that in 3 years. Rashid Shaheed's an unknown until he can prove himself. I'm just keeping it realistic. And then the fact that, you had Sean Payton, the best offensive play caller in the NFL, and you had Drew Brees that even at the end of his career was still a top 5 quarterback. So, yes, I do believe this wide receiver room can be good. But am I ready to say it's the best in the league? I'm not. And they've got a long way to prove that they can do that. Right? Not saying it can't happen, but they've got to prove it. And I do believe that they certainly can. I believe that this Saints team has got really talented pieces there, and they're making the moves needed to make things happen. And that's good. But I also don't want to overhype them. And I think that it's easy to forget what teams have done in the past and what players have done in the past, but it does have some relevance right now. When we talk about this receiver room and everything, it has relevance. Gotta wait and see what ends up happening. Don says, Seahawks have a good wide receiver room. Bengals have a good wide receiver room. In fact, let me bring up those wide receiver rooms just to give a visual, all right? Let's give a visual. So you mentioned the Seahawks. Let's look at the Seahawks. Here's their wide receiver core. Tyler Lockett, who I think is grossly underrated. Jackson Smith Njigba. I remember him in the draft, but I can't pronounce it. And then DK Metcalf. So very good with 2 proven quality wide receivers. Best in the league? Maybe not. But definitely more proven quality than what we've seen in New Orleans the past couple of years. Move over to Cincy. You've got Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd. That's 3 very good quality sets of wide receivers. That's not throwing shade at anybody else because that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to throw shade. I'm just saying that even though you have the potential for New Orleans to really have a good unit, and I agree that potential is there. Hell, you can go look at Tampa, who still has Chris Godwin and Mike Evans and Russell Gage. If they can be healthy, that is the best wide receiver room in this division. If they're healthy. If they're not healthy, well, that's one thing. But that's in terms of wide receiver rooms. That's the best one in the division. Now, quarterback situation over there, precarious at best. Kyle Trask, Baker Mayfield, John Wolford. Quarterback situation, probably not able to take advantage of the wide receiver room. But I just want to see the New Orleans Saints receivers prove what you're saying, right? And I also agree with what Krass says is that realistically, you need to be 4 deep at wide receiver going in for 17 games and the postseason, arguably 5 deep. And New Orleans is not 5 deep either. So as we continue to kind of like look at that and see these teams grow, maybe you find that 5th guy. If you're looking at New Orleans, that 5th guy to me is A.T. Perry and Brian Edwards right now. Maybe James Washington. Some veterans mixed with some young guys. I am excited about the AT, and I want to see if he's developing. And I also want to see Rashid Shaheed prove to me that he's taking it to the next step, right? I love Rashid Shaheed, and I know some of the times where I'm trying to truly be pragmatic, it sounds like I'm being negative. But the truth is I'm not about to just bet my whole world on Rashid Shaheed. Because one thing that I talk about all the time is you give a team film, they're going to find out how they can stop you and take advantage of you. You now have Rashid Shaheed film, and people know to look for him. He's no longer an unknown. Will he be able to grow and have the same level of success now that teams know who the heck he is and the teams are going to be gunning for him? I hope so. I'm not trying to say it won't happen. I'm just saying that these are things that have to be considered as we're going through this process. Now, Gundam says, I stand by my opinion of the New Orleans Saints wide receiver core because they are super intelligent. Run Chris Sprouts, and the maturity has been displayed. And I think that's fine, Gundam. My only rebuttal would be you can see that in other places as well, right? That's not unique to New Orleans, but I will agree that we have a better set than a lot of other places. But hell, I'm excited about Justin Jefferson being teamed up with Jordan Addison in Minnesota, right? Even though Minnesota getting rid of Delvin Cook is a little weird for me, I feel like I'm missing a story there. Like there's something going on I'm not familiar with because that's a little wild to me. But either way, if you're the Saints, there's definitely opportunity for not only success here, but long-lasting success. So we're going to get some of y'all's opinions real quick. I'm trying to, if you're wondering why the key clicks, I'm trying to log into my health chart because I've got a prescription I got to renew, and I just thought about it, and ADD is really crazy that I need to do it. I feel like I need to do this right now, but I don't remember my password. That's annoying. Is that the password? Maybe. Nope. All right. Hold on. Give me just a second. I'm going to do this real quick. And I'll be back to chat. But, chat, if y'all do want to believe that y'all's guys have got it here at the wide receiver room, I'm cool for it. Dalvin Cook wants a lot of money. I get that Dalvin Cook wants a lot of money. But Dalvin Cook already had a contract. So you could have just let him play this year and then got rid of him. I'm sad my presence isn't requested for the Hoodies WDC shows. Daniel, it is. It is good to see you. I mean, you could have just had Cook play off the last bit of his contract and then let him go. So, Jerry, good to see you, my friend. You respect that. Thanks. You're welcome, Gundam. You know, I think just because, and I'll try to tell people this, if you come into the show with a different opinion than me, that doesn't mean that you're wrong. Because we're talking about opinions, right? And when I'm doing these type of shows, I've really got to base a lot of my analysis based on film that I watch and analytics for teams that I don't follow heavy. And I don't want to be a black and gold leaning podcast. That makes sense? Like, I love this show. I love this community. Y'all are amazing, and y'all never, ever convince me that y'all aren't the most amazing Saints pod group in the world. But at the same time, I don't want to be a Saints podcast that just hypes up our guys, because I do want y'all to see what I see from a player evaluation standpoint and from a, analysis standpoint from working in this league, that it isn't all sunshine and raisies and gumdrops and, rainbows. There are definitely things that this team has got to figure out, and there are big question marks that can prevent this team from being a 9-10 win team. On paper, it looks like it. Like, if I booted up Madden right now, and I can't afford Madden, so if you would like to help me purchase Madden, I can't afford Madden. Like, guys, I told y'all, I spent $500 for the 2 weeks of groceries. The price of groceries has gone insane, and I'm a single income household. So if y'all do want to buy Madden for me, PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, not required, but appreciate it. This roster on Madden, I swear, can go straight to the playoffs, full sim. Don't have to do any adjustments. This roster is good enough. But we got to be realistic, right? And I think that's okay. It's okay to hype, too, because I see Dan saying that Ross Jackson got me thinking we're going 17-0. I love Ross. Ross is a good friend of mine. Like, I legitimately consider Ross Jackson a friend, like an actual friend. And we don't always agree on the level of excitement, but I get why he's excited. Like, I see the reason. But the evaluation in me makes me take a step back. It's also when me and Maddie hang out. Maddie is now the third person that I'm personally aware of who is going through the scouting academy to learn about player evaluation. And when you learn about player evaluation, it naturally teaches you to slow down and really dive into these guys and see, can they really do what we're hoping they can do? Does that make sense? That's all I'm saying. It's not that being positive is bad. It's not bad. Be positive about your team. But at the same time, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Derek Carr is a top 5 guy. What I will do instead is I'll tell you, hey, here's some things about Derek Carr you may not have known that are really sneaky good. And if used in the right way, man, that could be actually really cool. For example, let me pull up this one that I talked about a few months ago that maybe y'all have forgotten because I haven't heard any other podcast bring it up. So either people aren't listening to my show to steal my material, or they don't think it's relevant. But I do think it's relevant, so damn it, I'm going to repeat it again. Y'all better love me. Fourth quarter. Derek Carr last year in the fourth quarter had a 154.4 QB rating. Insane, right? Second quarter, 74.7. This man gets better as the game goes on. Starts off sluggish. And people came to me and say, well, Rev, that was just 1 year. What about the other years? Because this is not normal, by the way. Normally, quarterbacks, especially on losing teams, do worse in the fourth quarter because they're pressing. They're trying to make things happen. Well, fourth quarter in 2021, 109.7 QB rating, 93 QB rating in the second quarter. This isn't saying that he's doing bad in the second quarter. 93 is still really, really good. But for whatever reason, he heats it up. He gets hot. Pressure situation does him really well. And in fact, if you go and look, in his career, he has 28 fourth quarter comebacks and 33 game-winning drives, and he's actually led the league in that as a quarterback. The man thrives under pressure. Doesn't mean that he makes great decisions all the time, because he's definitely not shown that he's a Hall of Fame quarterback. But there are situations that make you go, damn, maybe I can rely on him in certain things. So it's good to see all these different levels. Like, I'm not going to argue that Derek Carr is going to give the best fade pass in the back corner of the end zone, nor do I believe that he always makes the best decisions when attacking the middle of the field. But at the same time, if you talk about a guy that you need to rely on and that you believe can make a pass, Derek Carr can. And that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So, Gunham says you are a professional analyst and I'm just a motivated Saints fan. And ain't nothing wrong with that at all, my friend. I'm telling you honestly and earnestly, there is nothing wrong with that. If you want to be a passionate fan, even to the point where you're just like, Rev, you're wrong, I believe this way, I'm okay with that. Now, earlier in my life, when I was younger, dumber, and full of other things, I might have just sat here and argued with you and be like, no, you're wrong. This team sucks, and you need to admit that they suck. But I'm not here to do that, because I think there's a balance, and I find that two people can have two truths, and you find the overlap in those truths. That's what I have learned. That's what I believe is the correct way to go about it. So, yeah, there you go. That's my spiel. And I'm definitely curious to see what y'all think about all this. And even beyond that, a little kind of like closing statement here, what do y'all have that y'all think is the best and worst part of this team? And we'll kind of use this to cover this in the next stream. Don says, I think he should automatically be a little bit better just playing outside the Raiders. That's just an organization that guys don't put up good offensive numbers with for some reason. I think the offensive line is going to help him out, hopefully. So, hopefully. Daniel says, I'm very hopeful that Carr is a whiz and that receiving multiple play calls will unlock him as a top 10 QB. Same. Is Matt Moscano the most negative Saints podcaster of all time? Nick, I'll say this. I'm not speaking against Matt Moscano as a person, because I know sometimes these things get back to them. But Matt Moscano is a radio host. Radio host? One, or a dying breed, because radio is dying. But two, radio, just like national TV shows like when Skip was with Shannon Sharp and everything, those shows have to bring up negativity because those are talking points that get people going crazy. I don't think that Matt Moscano is a stupid guy. I just think that Matt does his role well, and his role is to rile up fans, because riled up fans come to the show. So he's going to feed you some things that are easy to agree with, strategy, and then he's going to hit you with bombs. This is why Dennis Allen is stupid. And he's going to draw in two people. One is going to draw in the people that automatically believe anything that he says. And two, he's going to bring in all the people angry that somebody would say something so outlandish. But at the end of the day, all that did was drive the numbers up for his radio show, which increased the ad sales, which allows him to stay on the air. And I have nothing against him. I don't have any issue with him as a person. But I personally hate that style of analysis, and I've never been able to do it. I've been offered those type of roles in the past. I don't want to be the clickbait voice of radio or the clickbait voice of podcasting. And if that means that my show never has 500 people listening to it live at any given time, I'm okay with that. I would rather hang out with the fans who want to learn the difference between an inside zone run and an outside zone run and a split zone run. I'd rather have the ones wanting to know why we need a 3-tech defensive tackle more than we need a 1-tech defensive tackle, or vice versa. I'd rather have the fans going, hey, teach me what this quarters match system is that Dennis Allen runs. And I stay in my circle, right? And that, again, this is not negative. I'm not here to blast anybody else's content. There are also Saints podcasts out there that are pure opinions, just guys hanging out. They're big Saints fans, and they're just talking Saints, and they use box scores for all of their stuff. And that is absolutely okay. Absolutely okay. But that's not what you're going to get here. What you're going to get here is my attempt to really break down and give you a pragmatic analysis of where this team's at any given time. And hopefully I can make this an enjoyable pod while we do it. Right? That's just my personal thing. I have nothing against Matt. I love Ross Jackson. He is overly positive. And I think that there are people who could be too negative. Like, there are people out there who just shit on the Saints just for the sake of shitting on them. And that's their stick. But that's just not what you're going to get here. And Kranz, I see you, buddy. I appreciate you. And don't worry, I haven't forgot it. Are we one injury away from a disaster at the interior of the O-line? All we have is Throckmorton and a rookie. My only rebuttal to that, Kranz, that rookie is going to be something special. I'm just going to leave it at that. That rookie is going to be something special. I'll leave it at that. See, AJ, it's not even shade. I was being honest. Like, my personal opinion is Matt Moscano type shows are bad for fans because it doesn't truly educate them. But that doesn't mean the shows are bad or that they're not enjoyable. People obviously like them, so go to them. It's just not what I do, right? And that's okay, right? Matt Moscano's never come from my neck, and I've never come for his. We're just using his name as an example because people brought it up. And there's 110 people watching live in the middle of June, which is mind-blowing, by the way. Thank y'all for y'all's support. That's just kind of where I'm at, right? My goal is to provide a level of analysis that I don't believe really exists in this space. That's what I'm trying to do to help. Josh, thank you for sending loves. Deuce prefers the Yankee concept. I mean, do you really want to know what my favorite passing concept is? I'm curious if y'all actually care. Y'all don't have to care. I'm very curious if anybody can guess what my favorite passing concept is. It's an oldie but a goodie. Oldie but a goodie. Four verts, that's a good one. Dagger is actually great. Trips right is an alignment, Lester, not a concept. Just a quick little breakdown. An alignment is where receivers align. An alignment can also be like a +2 alignment where you line out a little bit wide. So you can run 4 verticals from a trips alignment, but that's not an actual passing concept. You can also run a bubble screen from a trips alignment. So that's just kind of, crazy one. TJ brings up one that I actually really do love that New Orleans doesn't use enough. It's the Mills concept. And the reason I like the Mills concept, you see all these teams getting into quarters defense right now. The Mills concept is what I want to see New Orleans use more often. Now, we may need to do a video breaking this down, but the Mills passing concept is literally designed to draw the free safety down into the slot receiver, and you're really trying to take advantage of what you can do with that hot route, that shallow cross especially. You want to bring them down, and you want to attack that quarters concept. You basically want to destroy it from the inside and open things up. And I love that coverage read because that means when you destroy it, I guess I should probably bring up a, example of a play of us destroying cover 4. And I'm not going to use us. I'm going to just use a weekly I'm just going to use a channel that I Googled real quick. I don't really know this channel, but it does show what I'm trying to show. So I'm going to put it up on the screen to give you a visual example of what I'm talking about. I love mills because we create a conflict defender. If y'all have never heard me use that term, a conflict defender simply means that we're making a defensive player have two choices. And whatever choice they make, we do the opposite. So when we're running a Mills concept against cover 4, which what you can see here is we're trying to exploit the safeties and the linebackers. And if that safety bites down on this in route like it does here, what does it do? It opens up the field back here. For those who are unfamiliar with the quarters concept, quarters implies the deep portions of the field are covered by one man quarterly. So outside the numbers, inside the numbers, inside the numbers, outside the numbers. So if you can put those guys in conflict and those safeties bite down on the interior, you just opened up a 15-yard breaking post route that's probably going for a touchdown or a big play. But that's only one way you can attack it. I love the Mills concept right now because so many teams in the NFL, Philly, New Orleans, etc., are utilizing these quarters concepts. They become much more important over the past 5 years. It's currently my favorite design in football. And now you know. Now you know. Crazy, right? Crazy. Cool stuff. Y'all are learning football here right now. We can go over what the routes are in those and stuff on a different show, but smash whip is a great one. Any type of Hank concept I really like. Mesh concepts I like. But because I want to see this team really attack deep again, yes, the Yankee concept exists. And the Yankee concept does take a single a single safety and put them in conflict. Mills puts the entirety of cover 4 into conflict, and that's why I absolutely love it. Puts both safeties in conflict in that situation. So I'm a big fan of it right now, and I'm really hoping we get more of that this year. But hey, the show has run a little bit long, but I think it's been a great show. I really do. I think today's been a great show. All that I'll ask you to do if y'all want to support the channel, if you want more shows like this, and if you want more content like this, help a brother out. Hit up the PayPal link, hit up the Venmo, hit up the Cash App. It is completely optional, guys. You don't have to do it. Or check out our merch store, pick you up our new hats, our new t-shirts, our new hoodies. All these help out the podcast so we can continue to do this out. I want to do more film studies, but to do that, I need time, and time is money. So again, I'll continue to do the podcast whether y'all donate or not, but so I can do more stuff, this is how you make it happen. I appreciate y'all. Who dat? God bless. I'm going to catch you on the next one. Thursday, we'll be back right here. Thank you for everything. I appreciate you more than I can ever really relay. And I'll see you in the Discord.